or they couldn't come today for one reason or another. It doesn't say the recording started. Let me try one more time. Nope, there it goes. Okay, I guess it just takes a minute to say we're recording. All right, so happy holidays, everybody. I am so glad that you were able to meet with us today. In looking at the feedback from last time when we got together, there were some people that said they would love to have some facilitators in the breakout sessions today. So I've invited some veteran GT teachers and GT coordinators to meet with us today. And so Toddy Adams from Marshall County will be a facilitator today. Thanks, Toddy. And Heather Hicks is joining us from Boone County. She's going to facilitate today. And then we also have, I'm looking for Kathy Carver. Kathy, are you here today? Kathy Carver, maybe she's going to join us in just a second. Let me see if she's texted me. Somebody's texted me here. Let me see if it's Kathy. Looking for Kathy Carver also said that she was going to try to meet with us today. No, maybe she'll join us in just a second. You know, seems like KDE is one of the few entities or departments that uses Microsoft Teams. So maybe she'll join us in just a second. I'm looking down through the list of people. Don't see her just yet. I may have to reach out to her in just a second. But she also offered to facilitate. If not, I might reach out to one of you other guys to facilitate if she's not able to jump on.
Kathy,
hey,
I'm
Toddy.
text her right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Toddy. Okay. All right. So let's get started then. Got lots of things I want to share with you guys. And let me see here. I may not be able to see you really great, but we'll see. All right, so this is our agenda for today. So I'll do a KDE and GT update. We're going to talk about special considerations and local norms. A lot of requests for services for what do we do during COVID or NTI for services. And I hope that you'll do some sharing, not only with the big group to help me. I've started a spreadsheet with resources and things on it that I'm going to put up in our shared Google folder today. But you may have some other things that you might want to put into our chat box over there on the right-hand side. Also, we're going to take some time and do some breakouts. We'll probably have about a 5-minute break while I'm fixing all that up because Microsoft Teams has a new breakout sessions feature. Yay! So we're going to try that out today. You're all going to be my guinea pig group for that. We'll see how that goes. But I'll need a few minutes to put people in groups. And there was some feedback that said they would like a GT group, a GT teacher group, and a both group, you know, if you do both of those. So we're going to try that today and see how that goes. Does that sound okay to you guys? Thumbs up, nod. Okay, all right. If that doesn't work as well, we might try doing elementary, middle, and high next time or whatever y'all think might work better, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm excited about that. We'll talk about some upcoming staff and student opportunities, and you may have some that I don't know about, so that would be great. And then we'll look at setting a date for our next meeting. All right. So I'm just going to share some headlines from you. The main thing that I have taken from what's going on at KDE, at least from our department, is that the governor reached out to Commissioner Glass and asked for some feedback from the different advisory councils about what to do about going back to school. And as you know, I'm sure that's been a hot topic in your district as well. Has that been kind of a topic in your district? I see some people nodding their heads and stuff. And from the headlines that I can read, it seems like there are varying opinions on that. Imagine that. And it seems like some people feel like the districts need to decide based on what their health departments say and what the data tells them. Other people think we should stay virtual and just try to lessen the pandemic that way. So if you want, unmute yourself and share what you think, or, you know, what's the discussion been in your district, Or if you want, you can just put something in the chat and share that way. But I'd like to kind of hear back from this group, how do you feel about that? What do you think we should do? Should we go back to school, in person? Should it be, a hybrid? Who should decide that? Should the governor mandate, What are your thoughts?
I think whenever's decided, it needs to be statewide, because if not, it just really creates a lot of discrepancies between our districts, especially when it comes to athletics.
Okay. So, and Beth says she agrees with that. All right. So you think it should be, some people think it should be a statewide, we should all be doing the same thing. It shouldn't be a district decision. And then some people think it should be a district level decision. Okay. All right. Well, it seems like, y'all kind of agree with some of the advisory council people. Michael says, at a minimum, I would like to see us get back to hybrid. In looking at MAP scores, our students are trending the wrong direction. Yeah, and that's one of the things I think somebody said they would like to talk about today, is what to do about students who aren't being successful virtually. So, all right, more comments about district level according to their needs. And then Jessica says, we haven't gone back at all this time during the whole time. And that's got to be really hard, Jessica, not having seen students in person this whole time. All right. Yes. Hannah's saying that they're having an issue with students failing and falling behind. It is incredibly sad. And I think we're wondering, well, what will the plan be? I know Toddy and I have talked about several times, and Kathy have talked about, what will the plan be going forward, helping students catch up? There's got to be a plan, a system in place for that. So, well, thank you so much for those comments. All right. So what's going on here at the GT office? Well, I promise you I'm not up here eating Christmas cookies, although I would like to be. I love Christmas cookies. Feel free to send me some if you'd like. I will put my address at the end. No, just joking. But so we have started state consolidated monitoring process, and 10 districts have been selected. I don't really feel at liberty to share those with you because I'm not sure that that's something that we're supposed to put out there. But some of the districts that weren't monitored last year because COVID hit around March, we'll be picking those up this year, and looking forward to meeting with those districts. And even though we aren't going to go, in person, we're going to meet virtually. I'm still looking forward to getting to know people better and finding out what they're doing during this time. Because since I'm not in the classroom anymore, that's a good way for me to figure out what resources are being offered and what people are doing about assessment, and how I can support them. So that will start the middle of January and we'll go through April. So that's going to kind of affect our meeting schedule a little bit next year, but we'll talk about that later. Also, I want to share with you guys here in a few minutes some title programs and GT funding. At the State Advisory Council, David Malanti spoke for his program areas and shared with us a document that I thought you might find interesting. So I'll bring that up here in a second. Or maybe I should just do it right now before I forget. Let me just do that. And I'll bring that over here. Can you see the document, the Word document that has like the program title on it and that type of thing? Okay, good. All right, so David is Director of Continuous Programs and Support, and with Kelly Foster's group. And so Lynette Baldwin, who's one of our advisory council members, asked for kind of a session on our agenda about Title I and the title programs and how that funding could be used for GT. So I'm going to post this into our shared Google Drive. But as you can see, David went over Title I Part A and talked about like Title I Part A, that it can be used. And I hope I don't make anybody sick. I'm going to scroll a little bit. But can be used to assist schools, it's down here, in identifying and serving students, And there may be certain criteria that have to be met. You know, it might have to be a Title I school, or a school might have to be Title I. But you can look through this. There's Title I Part C. This can be used to support services and ensure students benefit and get the largest benefit from programs there. There's Title I Part D. And again, this can be used in the area of gifted to identify, and funds can be used to support programs and activities and services. And let me see here. So that's Title I Part D. There's Title II Part A, and this can be used for training and support. And Title III, this has to be EL students who have been identified as EL students, but it can be used to help teachers learn how to identify ELs for GT services. Title IV Part A, this can also be used for professional development, and it talks about 3 content areas of grants. That may be further up here in this little paragraph here. I'm just kind of quickly going through it because we have so much to share today. Then there's Title IV Part B, and this has to do with students who are struggling academically, experiencing chronic absenteeism, that type of thing. And this primary focus, it says, is the 21st century community learning. And there's lots of information there about that. Then there's also Title V Part B. And like I said, I'm going to share all of this. I'm going to put it up there in our shared Google Drive, so don't feel like you've got to write everything down. But there's a lot of information there about Title IV Part B. So there are other funds out there besides GT funds, and so I wanted to share that with you. All right. Also, there have been several GT Cadre meetings since we last met, and most of them, I would say, just overall have also had questions about how to assess students, when to assess students, again, ideas for serving kids. WKY had a meeting last Friday, and there was a lot of good sharing that went on, and I'm hoping to share some of those service ideas with you guys here in a few minutes. Also, our KVEC Cadre, and I see Jennifer Carroll is here from that. She facilitates those meetings for us. We had a fabulous meeting too, and just a lot of good sharing and feelings of goodwill and support. And she shared some really awesome resources, and I'm hoping to share some of those with you too, because there's no sense in inventing the wheel, is there? All right. And then I want to share a little bit with you about the Gifted Student Service Plans. There's been some questions about that, and also progress reports. And I'm really glad, like I said, that Kathy Carver is here. Don't mean to put her on the spot, but wanted to share a little bit about a new way that you could think about getting with your cases to contact do progress reports, because I know that's something that y'all are thinking about. And I'm not really sure why I put Gifted Student Service Plans up there, because it just seems like the two go together, I guess. I don't really have any new things to share with you on that, except to say that I know that you're working on those, and I know that it's probably harder during the pandemic to get all that done, because I know many of you meet with teams of people to coordinate that. But let me just share this this progress report. See if I can bring that up here real quick. And Kathy, if you wouldn't mind to unmute yourself, if I can find it. Let's see here, and talk a little bit about that. That would be awesome.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. What am I talking about now? Oh, yeah.
Creating the GT Progress Grade Report. So
I'm not important enough to have rights to go in and create it, but we had someone in our district that I work with who I sat down with and said, this is what I want to do. So there's some things you have to have made or created. They made GT courses in Infinite Campus, like a class. And so I go in and add all my kids. And so I have at each school, and it's just called Gifted and Talented, and it shows up on their schedule. So that's step one. You have to have classes set up. Even if you don't meet like a class, it's just in an extra box on their schedule at the bottom. It also, I feel like when it shows up on their schedule, I feel like it's another communication tool with parents to say, to remind them that they're part of the program, that we're there, you know, that it's happening. I just feel like offers more credibility. So then she goes in and she makes this progress report, and this is not original. This is, we found it on a transfer kid from Christian County. Christian County did this. We just piggybacked, adopted, stolen, whatever you want to say. But I had a record and I was like, how do they have this? How do they have this progress report? And our district person said, oh, I can make that. So this is where that came from. So they went in and created it, put in the standard, so to speak. And we're on trimester, which I don't know if any of you all are on trimester. Most of you all are on semester, where it ends in December and starts back in January. But we end in somewhere in November, and then we go November to February, and then February to the end of school. So we have 3 during the year. So mine's going to look a little different than yours. But so I go in and they fill out the progress report still in gifted and talented tab, but then I get summary and I go in and put their grades in, and it prints that. So, and you can make it as fancy as you want to. You can include a logo of your school, but then all of the records clerks at my schools all will print the report cards for the children and give them out, send them home. And if you're GT, you get this attached to the back of it. Again, great communication tool. The parents realize that it's a valid part of instruction, that we are monitoring it. So it's great communication. I hope I didn't bumble over that too bad.
No, I think you did a great job. So some of the pros for this that are maybe a better system than the one we've got in Infinite Campus now is, number one, you don't have to touch every single progress report. That's probably the biggie right there. Number two, you can see it in the parent portal, right? And number three, you're not inventing something new. You're already using tools in Infinite Campus. You're using the class schedule tool and the report card tool. So the only thing about this is you can't do it yourself. You would need to get with your cases contact or your district admin, those people that would have rights to help you with this. But I'm going to put these directions into our shared folder, and you don't feel like you have to do this. This is not something you have to do. It's just something I wanted to share with you guys, because I know you're looking for ways to improve your systems so that you spend more time working with kids rather than doing paperwork. Kathy?
And there's a place for comments, like if you need to say, because kids are maybe gifted in several areas, I try to average, I try to see if they've got a meets, exceeds, and a needs improvement, and I'll put the majority. Like if they're just doing overall well, that's what goes in the column. I'm sure it can be tweaked if you wanted to change it up a little bit, but I put the majority meets, and then in the comments, I put, he got a needs improvement in math, something needs to be done there, blah, blah, blah. He's not doing the following. And I update the parents. And as soon as I hit save, they can see it in their portal. And I get feedback from the parents immediately sometimes. And what do I need to do for little Johnny? And, here's what's been going on with little Johnny. I just thought you needed to know. And so it really is like real time, and that's important. We do print them just for a visual for the kid in some schools, but if you didn't want to waste the paper and the ink, if you all don't do report cards like that, if you all are all Infinite Campus virtual, it's there and it's handy and it's fast. And I'll quit talking.
No, I think that those are great points to make. And again, I'm going to put this in our shared Google Drive. If you don't have access to this, if you're a new person today and I haven't added you to our shared Google Drive, shoot me an email. I'll add you to the drive. Glad to do that. All right, so back to the PowerPoint, because that helps me stay on point. I don't know if that's why they call it PowerPoint, but that helps me. Also, there have been some requests for some information about leadership. And this is a hard one this time during the pandemic, because so many times leadership is definitely something that we do in person for our students to provide, services to show that they're willing to do different things. So we do have a leadership video that's coming to you hopefully after the winter break. We are working on that and hope to get that posted after the winter break. I do want to share some thoughts with you about leadership since that's come up recently on the KGAT listserv. And if you aren't a member of the KGAT listserv, if you don't know how to do that, shoot me an email. I'll send you how to join that. Lots of good information comes over the KGAT listserv. There are questions that people will put out there, and people will answer them. And there was one on leadership recently, so I just wanted to give a little technical assistance about leadership. So according to the gifted regulation, leadership has to be determined by a variety of informal measures. Some people use formal measures too, but it's really important to look at that word and say variety. You're looking for multiple measures, right? Different types of evidences for kids. And so it has to be documented by this willingness, okay, that's an important word there. Talk about that some more in a second, of a student to assume leadership roles in class, in a student organization, and a community activity. So we're looking to document all three of those things. And I know that probably seems like an enormous task without being the pandemic. So just remember that the and there in the regulation stipulates all three need to be looked for and need to be documented. Okay. So we've had many conversations about that word willingness over the decade. And we've talked about that the willingness can be defined as potential that student might have, and also as showing the ability to, showing that ability. But they need to be showing not just participation in the program, but that leadership. And some people say, oh, I don't think that can start very early. And I kind of disagree with that. I think leadership in a student starts to show up pretty early on. We were having a discussion about this the other day, and one of the people said, it's kind of like when you ask children to line up in a line, and you've got those little ones out there that go to help you with that, and go to help, especially if you say, let's line up alphabetically. And then you've got those students that kind of help the other students get themselves lined up. Those are those first signs that you've got children who are kind of leaders, that they show that innate ability to help, to assist, to take charge, that type of thing, right? And so some of the evidences that can also be included as you're looking for this are sociograms. So these are questionnaires, right? Questions that will ask, questions about like, who would you go to if this? Who would you go to if that? Those types of questions. Peer recommendations can be really helpful, and if you need some examples of these, I'm sure myself or some of the veteran staff members who are on here, we could upload some of those into our Google Drive. Is there anybody out there that needs a sociogram or a peer recommendation? Oh, I see some hands going up. All right, let me make a note of that so I can put some of those in the Google Drive, because those are helpful. Peer nominations and sociograms, because there's some out there that are really good that will be very helpful for that, because your students will know who they go to when they rely on somebody to be a leader, that type of thing. Behavior checklist, those are in our GT sample handbook, which we took down and are hoping to get back up after the first of the year. Those jot downs that we talked about, that we've got up there in our shared folder, those are really helpful. Portfolio entries, portfolios are great. Heather Hicks, are you on here? Heather kind of helped me understand how portfolios could be helpful for leadership. Heather, could you talk a little bit more maybe about how portfolios, don't mean to put you on the spot, how portfolios are helpful for leadership?
Sure. When I was at Walton Verona, we used this for leadership, and it was really something that was a year-long process. We had the different components that were required to demonstrate that leadership in all three categories, in class, in a student organization, and in the community. And they had, occasional check-ins, but it worked really well. I still have the template, for the directions and our scoring guide. Here in Boone, we're just so big, that's just such a cumbersome process. So we have started using a resume, so to speak, here. It's similar to the portfolio. It just doesn't have as many artifacts, but both worked really well. I'd be happy to share any of that, or if you need elaboration, you know, if you're interested in going the route of a portfolio, please reach out. I'm happy to help with that.
Okay. If it wouldn't be too much trouble, if you could email that to me, Heather,
Sure.
then I
Sure.
could put that up in our shared drive in case somebody wanted to use that.
Yes, ma'am. Happy to share.
That'd be awesome. And if you've got any tips on that resume process that you talked about, that people are always looking for help on how to identify students for the different areas, and that would be really helpful. Really helpful. We had a process in Shelby County, but it was kind of a recommendation process where students had to turn in, you know, letters from people other than their family members. We had a kind of a self-assessment that students would complete, you know, and I always kind of felt a little bit bad about using the self-assessment because some people are a little afraid to toot their own horn, so to speak, and so they didn't rank themselves very high at times. And then what else did we use? I think we used a behavior checklist too. So people are always looking for different ways to identify students in the area. So anything that anybody has out there that they'd like to share, that would be great. Anybody else have any ideas about how or want to share how your district goes about identifying students for leadership? Feel free to unmute yourself or just type in the chat.
Kathy, may I pipe in here quickly? I'm sorry.
Yes, please pipe on up.
Well, you mentioned sociograms, which I think they're wonderful, and anybody who has ever used them probably quickly recognizes, especially when you do it with the whole grade level of students, it's quite cumbersome to try to score and figure out. One thing that we have found that works really well is putting them in Google, and we upload the whole class list of names so that it's a drop down that they can choose from for each student. The nice thing with that is it compiles it all. If you have them type the names and the spelling varies, that makes it really hard. So one of our school contacts has done that, and it works really well with the with bringing the names in from Infinite Campus and then compiling that data, and it's so much faster. So.
All right. And then Amanda says in the chat over here, I think the and community activities limits a lot of low socioeconomic kids because their parents won't have them involved in community activities. Well, that's a good thing to bring up, Amanda. And we're going to be talking about special considerations here in a second. So, that's something we can talk about more at that time. Because, that is true. That is true. There can be some barriers for kids because of, different conditions and things. Lisa wants to know, what is an example of potential leadership rather than actually demonstrating leadership in the community? Well, that's a good question. One example I like to give is that I had a student that they ran for a student organization leadership role. They weren't voted in by their peers, but they did demonstrate that ability to run and to lead a really good campaign. And I thought that demonstrated a leadership, even though they weren't voted by the student body to be the leader. So to me, that would be an example. Does anybody else have some other examples of willingness, that willingness aspect there?
Kathy, I know that, and even with some of our resource teachers, with the low income schools, they just even do interviews or have dialogue with the students on what they're willing to do. There's opportunity, and if they could do that, if they could participate, they would be. And they can document that as a willingness as well.
That's a good idea. Interviewing students to find out, what their potential interest are, what their interests are, and what they would do given an opportunity to lead. That's a really good idea. Leslie says, I think we should also look for students who are helping their friends with their online work. Kids know who to go to for help and are often reaching out to the same people for assistance, not getting the answers, but actually being taught. That's a really good example too, Leslie. Students who are willing to reach out to their peers and to help. That's a really good example too. Anybody else want to share some thoughts about that?
Kathy, it's Lisa. So what I'm wondering with community, like Amanda mentioned, we've got a Title I school, and I'm just wondering if, for example, there was a problem-based learning activity and the student put in there something like a way that they would solve the problem would be to coordinate with an animal services or Humane Society or whatever the problem is, some resource in the community, just the actual intention of this is what my plan would be, but maybe they have socioeconomic barriers that prevent them from actually doing that. Would that be an example of potential leadership in the community outside of school?
I think it would be. I think that kind of goes back to what the person was talking about before, in that Julie said about interviews of children. You know, they say, well, if given the opportunity, I would like to do X. Now, I think it would, you know, might be better to actually see that in action, but at the same time, we're looking for that potential. We're looking for those diamonds in the rough, just like we do for any of the other areas, you know. So I think that's good. Toddy?
I have an example that I don't know, it might be a little bit different, but if we're going to talk potential, this is a good example, I think. I had a student who hated school. He was not going to run for an office. He wasn't going to participate in class. He was not going to, he just was not a academically minded person, but smart. I mean, could do the classes, he just wasn't into school. But he knew how to maneuver. He understood how people worked and their personalities. He understood how to influence people. He didn't influence them for bad, but he just, whether it was his group of friends or other groups, he was this natural born leader. He understood the workings, and he knew how to use that to attain a common goal. So there's potential there, even if he's not running for offices, and even if he's not doing community work or whatever, but all of that potential is right there. After he graduated, went into the National Guard, became an officer, went on to in absolute leadership roles, and did it for the good of his community. When I asked him why he joined the National Guard instead of joining another branch, he said, because I want to give back to my community. I want to give back. And this is the way I can do it at a local level, even though National Guard gets called out or whatever. So you talk about a diamond in the rough. I think we need to not just focus on what schools have to offer, but those intrinsic characteristics of a leader, the communication, the collaboration, initiative, out of the box thinking sometimes. So that would be potential where you don't actually see it in action in the school.
Right, right. And I would say too that, you know, if you see some of these characteristics, or you have some of these evidences, but you don't have them all, that there's nothing wrong with continuing to collect them, especially during the pandemic. You know, you put those students on a wait list. Say you've got that evidence of the classroom, and you've got that evidence of the school, but you don't have a community evidence right now because we can't really get out in the community or whatever. Then, you know, maybe that's something that you put a student on a wait list, or you do those interviews to say, well, you know, right now during the pandemic, we can't get out and do ABC, but if you could, what are some things that you might want to do if we given the opportunity? So really good discussion, you guys. Anything else that y'all want to say?
This is Michelle Kaysen. Oh, here, let me turn my camera on.
Right.
I know I've said this before, but I think that it's important to say again, and our idea of community and a kid's idea of community are different things. They are leaders in lots of communities, particularly online communities, whether it be in gaming or things that we don't traditionally think of as community. They are leaders in those virtual groups a lot of times. So just expanding the idea of community.
That's a good point, Michelle, especially during today's time. That's a very important point. Very important point. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else before we move on to our next topic today? Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Good conversation today. Thank you. All right. So we talked about the new way to create progress reports. Did I leave anything else out that I want to do on my update? I don't think so. We did start talking about equity because equity has been a big focus. The Kentucky board had a statement where they renewed their focus on equity. CAGE has done the same thing. So with the different groups that I'm a part of, we've started to kind of do an equity audit. And so you might wonder, well, what in the world is an equity audit? Well, an audit is where you just kind of take stock of you know, the areas that might need a look at equity. Somebody brought up, you know, our documents that maybe are on the website. We might want to look at our data. What does our data tell us about the equity in our state? What are some groups that we might want to reach out to in order to facilitate more equity in our GT program? So we're just kind of beginning the beginning stages of kind of talking about equity in our program. Sorry about that. But that's something else that's been going on since I last talked with you, is this talk about equity. All right. So let's talk for a few minutes about special considerations. Some people feel that special considerations is kind of a nebulous area in the regulation, and I kind of want to make it less nebulous for you and a little more clear. All right. So the gifted regulation talks about that we have exceptions and special considerations for eligibility, and this helps us to have equity in our gifted program. This term special considerations, because it allows us to take into consideration any kind of disabling condition that might be masking a student's gifts and talents. Okay, and 3 of the underrepresented populations that it talks about specifically, but these aren't just the only ones, okay? These are the ones it lists specifically, are our special education students, our students who are disadvantaged, and our students who underachieve, okay? So this is, like I said, I just want to stress, this is one way that we can ensure equity in our program areas. And in order to do this, it's really important that you have these GT selection and placement committees probably at your school level, you know, because those are the district staff who can have those conversations with you about those students who maybe don't bubble to the top because of their test scores, but maybe because of these gifted characteristics, because they know the students, that they will become a part of this conversation. So let's look at it a little bit closer. So these are conditions which might mask the gifted ability, which are mentioned in the regulation. So environmental, which might be their language. Disadvantaged, that can be cultural or it could be economic. It could be a student with a disability, and this is somebody that has an individual education plan. And there are many categories for you know, a student who's been identified as a special education student. An underachieving student, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the district has the all-encompassing other factors. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about this. So let's talk about environmental conditions for a second. Okay, so one of the environmental conditions could be transiency. You know, it might be a student who moves around, who's moved around to several different districts, or even within a school system. Maybe they have moved to several different schools within a district, right? And sometimes when a student moves from school district A to school district B, whatever was when they get to B, you know, B may have covered some information that maybe A hasn't covered yet, and so they're missing, you know, parts of their education there. Transiency can cause all kinds of issues. It can cause socio-emotional issues. I myself, when I was in 6th grade, we moved to Miami, Florida. And then the next year, my family moved to North Carolina. And I can tell you that move was life-changing for me. I went through a lot of things due to that move. You know, we changed economic status. I changed my socioeconomic status. It was really hard for me. And so transiency can have a really big effect on students, and that's something to think about. A home where enrichment and cognitive stimulation could be limited. You know, it might be. That might be an effect where, you know, maybe a student's in a home where maybe they don't talk a whole lot about different subjects, or maybe they don't have the means to go and do different types of things, to go to the zoo, to go to museums, to go to movies, you know, go to the beach, those types of things. Then there's parental perceptions and past experiences influence decisions regarding education. That might be an issue, you know, where parents have been in a school system and maybe they didn't have the best success in life. And so maybe you know, they have a different perception about how school can influence a student's, you know, experience. So these are all things that might be you know, an environmental condition. So any thoughts about that, or anything that you want to share about that, about environmental conditions there? Transiency, enrichment, parental perceptions. Yes, Heather.
You know, I think my lingering question, and probably you're going to get to this, Kathy, but is how do we document this in a thoughtful way, you know, so that if a parent requests an open record, you know, of the students, how is this documented? Because I know there were some discussions earlier this year about that, about, you know, if we have special considerations and then there's a notation, you know, the home has little enrichment and cognitive, you know what I mean? I just, how that is perceived, and how do we document that appropriately so that we aren't offensive?
That's a really good question, and I think that's something we do need to be sensitive to. Does anybody want to help me respond to that, or have any thoughts about that? Well, I definitely think that as you have your GT selection and placement committee, that a short conference summary perhaps is typed up and needs to probably be reviewed by someone that you in your committee that you feel like has those skills for being sensitive about how things are worded. I do think it's important to document the conversation that's had. I know we had kind of a checklist out there at one point, and we took that down because there was some culturally insensitive language in it. And so some of this language I have taken from my presentation today, but I've tried to be more culturally sensitive today. Any other thoughts besides a conference summary that talks about why the student was selected based on a disabling condition of some kind? Yes, Heather.
Is there the necessity to define that if we're having that conversation and we're selecting through special considerations? Is it a necessity that we articulate, you know, one of these in there, or could we just put environmental conditions verified through school admin team and then signed off? Could we do something along those lines that's a little bit more intentionally vague, just so that it is not offensive to someone?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Maybe so. Maybe so. I think this is something that we might need to talk more about as the GT leader cadre, and bring it up for more discussion. I definitely don't have all the answers, but y'all, that's a really good question. Julie, you got a comment?
Yeah, because I know when we do our special considerations, we always keep track of our minutes, like you're referencing, and again with appropriate personnel there, which a lot of times could be the social worker, depending on who's there at the committee meeting to decide upon this. Because again, many of our resource teachers are not privy to that information, but we have on a checklist per se where we collect the evidences. And if they're going through special consideration, it's a simple check mark of if it's environmental, exceptional, or underachieving, so that we know which way we're going as we continue to collect evidences. It's more of the beginning starting point rather than at the end.
Right. And I tend to lean that way myself. I don't know that you necessarily need to define, like you were saying, Heather. I think you've got to have 3 evidences, and then if you don't have, for whatever the criteria is, you don't have an evidence for that, and that's because there's been a disabling condition. It seems like to me that you could just check that in Infinite Campus, and we're going to talk more about how that looks in Infinite Campus in just a second. So I tend to lean the way y'all are leaning here, where you just you check something and then you don't go into a lot of detail about it. I don't think that that's really important. Heather?
I know in our case, and most of our special considerations, it's just boils down to not having that 9th Stay 9 full scale cognitive,
Right.
or that 9th Stay 9 specific academic. So that's how we have done it in the past, is we have a form, kind of like what Julie was describing, and that's signed off on and noted on our collection form for the meeting. But I just wanted to make sure that that was okay. And our goal was similar. We did not want to have any offensive language or anything that might.
Right. And I think that would probably be best. And since it's not really addressed in the regulation, it probably would be a district decision. Could you and Julie maybe shoot me those forms that I could share with other people? I think that would be helpful for other people.
I'm happy to share.
And what I'm trying to do is just talk a little bit about what these environmental conditions might be. So there might be a language condition as well. That might be a disabling condition. The student might be an English learner, but at the same time, they may be catching on to English really quickly, which would be a sign that a student might be gifted. Also, the language condition might limit opportunities for verbal stimulation. As we know, when we talk to our children and we use our words with them and we talk about different vocabulary, we know that helps to stimulate student growth. And so, there might be limited opportunities just due to different conditions in the home or in the community. The regulation talks about disadvantaged conditions. So with disadvantaged conditions, that might be, a potential ability to function meaningfully. I talked with a colleague about in my office about the different language I've used here, just trying to give some examples about disadvantaged conditions. So there might be this limited exposure, and that could be right now because of COVID. Students are having limited exposure. But if we weren't having COVID, some students still have limited exposure due to, being disadvantaged for one reason or another. The norms might be different. Your belief systems may be different from one culture to another. That could be an advantage and a disadvantage when I think about it. Students may be socially and emotionally fragile due to coming from a different culture, and that's something that we need to be aware of as well. And then when we talk about economic types of disadvantage, students can come from all different backgrounds, all different economic bases. You can have large families who maybe are living, just kind of sustaining their living level there. There could be large families, though, that have, lots of economic opportunities. So it just depends. And these are just things to be aware of. These aren't set in stone and things that you have to look at. And then just the inability to participate may be due to your economic means, So those are just a few things to think of. And again, I don't think that the regulation necessarily says that you have to write down all the different things that come with this. It's just things to be aware of and that might disable a student's ability to look kind of like a typical gifted and talented learner. So I've got some comments here. Sometimes students from disadvantaged conditions have language issues that are just as bad as ELL students. That is true. That's true. And then another person says, when documenting and writing, choose positive statements and verbiage that doesn't embarrass the family. That's a really good idea. That's a really good point. For instance, students possibly experience challenges related to academic life at school, including attendance and differences in scope and sequence of curriculum grading policies. That's very true. And that's probably where it might be best, rather than having all the different things about why you think a student's disadvantaged or all that, that maybe you have those conversations, but then you just record it as disadvantaged and then move on, rather than get into all that language. These are really good thoughts. Some other factors might be medical issues. You know, students who've been out due to breaking their leg.
All right, it's Michelle.
Whatever.
Can I just
Yeah,
add
go ahead.
something? Can I just add something to the one before that?
Yeah.
So I've been reading a lot about cultural and economic, what we call disadvantage, because we are engaged in equity work in Woodford County. So, and I'm kind of leading that with gifted. And I just want to point out that a lot of the things that you read right now that are coming out of it is that it's not as much disadvantage, it's advantage in areas that are not often recognized. So in traditional populations where we see cultural or economic disadvantage, you actually see quite high scores in visual spatial thinking, problem solving related to visual spatial thinking. And unless you're specifically looking for that or testing for that, it's just an area that is not as ingrained in our educational system currently. And I know I'm finding that even in Woodford County, that kids that we're considering for economic and cultural disadvantage for special considerations, you know, they have 6th and 7th stay 9 scores maybe on the language and math parts of the COGAT, but they're 99 in visual spatial thinking. It's just something to think about and consider, that if you use tests that have that, like we use Naglieri, so I pick up a lot of cultural and economic disadvantaged kids testing with the Naglieri test. There's just some things to think about with that, but visual spatial thinking is a huge part of that. Problem solving related to that is actually a huge advantage if you grow up in an economic or culturally disadvantaged. You have some of those different kinds of problem solving skills that actually makes it an advantage. So if we're curious about that, you can contact me.
Okay. No, I think that's a good point. That's a good point, because, you know, if you're disadvantaged in some way, like I said, you may not have had those vocabulary, maybe enriching conversations, but you still catch on to things very quickly, maybe visually and spatially. So I think that's a really good point. Sarah? You just need to unmute. You may see the unmute either at the top of your screen or the bottom. It may come up when you...
I'm so used to Zoom, but I didn't mean to have my hand up, and I don't know why it was up, and I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. No problem. All right. All right. And then Michelle has shared some reading material that she's... no, Kathy wants her to share that reading material, so she will. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really good point. So glad that we have some of our veteran people on here today who can help carry this conversation. That's awesome. So just some other factors, medical issues. You know, you may have students who've been out due to maybe they've had cancer, maybe they've broken a leg. There could be you know, multiple reasons maybe why they have been out of school, and maybe due to that been fallen behind. There can be other factors that are described in a formal recommendation that you know, parents or staff may want to share with you in a written explanation. So it's just really important to have those GT selection and placement committees. I would suggest if you or a big enough school district to have those at your different schools, because those are the staff that know those students that can have those discussions, so that you ensure that you're not missing any of those students, and that those students who maybe haven't bubbled to the top because of their test scores, that those students that maybe didn't score maybe as high as the other ones, other people will go, well, you know, I just don't understand why so-and-so, you know, didn't score there. I see this and this in the classroom. I see that they turn in this type of work. They ask these types of questions on our Zoom or Google Meets types of, you know, opportunities right now. So just something to think about, you know. All right. Any other conversation about that? Okay. These are definitions of exceptional children according to the special education regulations. So as you can see, there's many different types of students who could have an IEP besides those students who are speech and language, have been identified for speech and language. They can have an orthopedic impairment. I won't read all these. They can have either a cognitive or physical impairment. I had a really bright student that had a physical impairment, but very, very bright. And so even though he had an IEP, he was also identified as a gifted student, so he was twice exceptional. And I'm sure you have students in your district that have been identified as well. But something just to think about, because in our state, they are probably the most underrepresented category in our state. Less than 1% of our students in special education have been identified as gifted students. So that's just something to think about. And I guess just one more thought too, you know, this would be a really important, your special ed students, be a good time to reach out to your director of special education or your special education colleagues at your school, because these students already have a cognitive score of some kind from either the Woodcock-Johnson or the WISC or whatever. They already have a score, and you know, it'd be good to talk about with them. Do you see any discrepancies maybe between the verbal processing, their processing speed, and maybe their quantitative score or their verbal score or whatever? Just really important to talk with your people right now, since we're kind of pressing pause on, or kind of, it's different to assess students right now, to look at our EL students and our special education students, because they should have some sort of assessment that you could talk about with your colleagues about. And there's some things over here in the chat that Michelle is sharing. Visual spatial learning, and then another one there. Thanks, Michelle, for sharing those. And I think I'll be able to have a recording of the chat here that I can also share with you through our Google folder. Heather?
Thank you, Kathy. I'm curious if you have any kind of, it would be great if we had a look-fors kind of checklist for our EL coordinators and our directors of special ed, so that as they have those evaluations, if there were some look-fors that we could give to them, you know what I mean? That, I don't know if that's something that we could maybe develop. It would be awesome though to have that, so that we could have very specific things to ask them to be looking for.
Right. That's something I started a couple of years ago and then kind of pressed pause on, but that's something that maybe we could bring up again, because as you know, some students who are twice exceptional, or we think might be twice exceptional, they actually don't have any disabilities, you know, like if they're a music student or they're an art student, sorry about that. I lost y'all for a minute. But they, like I said, they may have a, you know, an IEP for reading or math, but they are just excel in a fine arts area. So I think it depends, but that is something that I've written down, and we'll put a little star beside that maybe we could think about working on. And it wouldn't have to be, you know, hard and fast. It could just be maybe some things that might be possible things for people to look for to help people. I think that's a good idea. Trying to move my mouse around so I can move forward. All right. Then underachieving students are also mentioned in the regulation. And so when we're thinking about underachieving students, the definition in the regulation is given for you there. But in a synopsis, you're looking at a student who's able to achieve at one level, but their work or their characteristics or whatever, they're showing that they're not achieving at their level. So there's a discrepancy there between what they can do and what they are doing, is what underachieving is. Here's some maybe possible causes of underachievement. That's probably what I should put up there, possible, not necessarily, you know, carved in stone, but a lack of motivation to apply themselves in school. And that could, you know, happen for lots of different reasons why kids want to apply themselves to school. Either maybe they're not interested, they just, I don't know, there's just probably different reasons there. Environments that may not nurture their gifts, it may not, you know, it may even discourage it. That could be a reason. Of course, during the COVID here, I feel like that these are probably things that are all going on right now. Disabilities or, you know, learning deficit that may mask their giftedness. So thought I had heard somebody that wanted to say something there. Comments? All right. Right, and I see that varied faces of gifted, that is up in our Google Drive that I've shared with you. I think I shared that with you in our first meeting together. That has some, it's a very long document, but I think it would help you if you're looking for those characteristics of different students from other, you know, those underrepresented populations. These are possible characteristics of underachievement, perhaps low self-esteem, negative attitudes towards school, maybe, you know, reluctance to take risk, a discomfort with competition, lack of perseverance or grit, you know, lack of goal-directed behavior, social isolation. That could be either self-imposed or imposed by others, other peers, a possible weakness in a skill area, organization, or just disruptiveness in class and resistance to class activities. And as I look through all these different things, I see that they're pretty negative, you know, and maybe they could be maybe worded a little bit more positively. But these are just some things to think about. Like I said, they're just possible. These aren't, and you wouldn't have to have all of them, that's for sure. And there could be a lot of reasons for why, you know, a person might have low self-esteem or, you know, just negative attitudes towards school. There could be lots of things going on there. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, how students are adapting and their affective, you know, mentality. So when we talk about special considerations and we're looking for students to identify, it's important to use that multiple criteria approach where you're not just looking at, you know, several test scores, that you're also looking at behaviors, that you're looking, having those discussions, like I said before, with your committees at school, that you're looking for work that the student has exhibited, those types of things. Maybe they've had a high score, but maybe it's not at the 96th percentile. So it's important, like I said, to discuss the whole child. It's really hard to do that if you don't have a committee, if you're just a committee of one. It's important also to look at the other evidences that are suggested in the regulation, and then to develop a process for using special considerations. So for example, you know, I've given some things there. You might want to develop a portfolio, or you might want to have interviews, or you might want to have work samples, but some sort of process and system to help you so that the special considerations aren't just a kind of one of those fuzzy things that are used in an organization. And then, you know, you might want to observe a student for more than just a day. You know, Bertie Kingor says in her observation inventories that she thinks it's important to maybe observe for 6 weeks of time. Something to think about. These are just some considerations. All right. These are some evidences from the KAR. Lots of different things there. I'm looking at our time, and I want us to have time to break into our groups today. We've had a lot of great discussion, and I don't know that we're going to get to all of the things that I've got on my slides today, and that's all right. You know, I can save them for another day. So I think what I felt like we didn't really have enough time last time to do our discussions, and I'm going to need a few minutes to put people in groups. The new Teams does allow you to have breakout groups. It doesn't allow you to do it ahead of time. And so I'm going to need a few minutes to put people in groups. So I think what I'd like to do is just break for about 5 minutes here. I'll throw up maybe a timer, or I'm looking at the time here. It says 11:06. And we could come back at, what would that be? 11:11 would be about 5 minutes, and that would give me a chance to break people into groups. And we're going to break into groups of GT teachers, GT coordinators, and then those people who are both the GT teacher and coordinator. And that's one of the reasons I asked you guys to fill out that registration form yesterday, so I'd know where to put people in groups. If I'm not sure, you know, if you are a GT teacher or a GT coordinator or both, I may just put you in a group, and I hope that'll be all right for today. Hope you'll give me some grace today. All right. So any questions before we break into our take a break for about 5 minutes? No? Okay. So let's come back. Let's say 11:12 now, because we're at 11:07, and I'll put up a little break thing here, a 5-minute break thing if I can. Let's see if I can get this to go. So start. Is this working? Okay. I see some people are still there. I'm back, but I am still trying to assign people rooms here. I need a few more minutes. So while I'm doing that, maybe we could look at some of the items for discussion. Let me put those up here so you can see them. And Heather, I hate to put you on the spot, but I need a few more minutes to assign people rooms. I hope y'all will understand that that sometimes takes a little while. And I'm looking for here. So some of the items that want to be discussed, and I thought we might could also discuss these in our breakout rooms, if you'll just give me a few more minutes, would be these items here. So Heather, not to put you on the spot, but maybe you could, y'all could talk, you could pick up one of these topics here while I finish assigning rooms to talk about. Maybe you could talk about, you know, share some ideas about virtual lessons, or you could talk about testing, what y'all are doing about testing in Boone County, and just give me a few more minutes. Whichever you want to do, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, gee, I don't know. Maybe if you don't mind, Kathy, I may talk about progress reports, because I think most of us are probably in that process of talking with teachers right now about student progress. And I remember seeing in the chat box earlier that I think it was Julie Gann mentioned that they have a lot of underachieving students right now. And we're seeing that, I know, in our county, where a lot of our kids are, the teachers are saying that they're not meeting, you know, the expectations right now for progress reporting. And you know, how to articulate that well. And something I know we had a discussion here in our county about yesterday was, we can't assume that a student's not meeting if we're not offering opportunities. And it's hard right now, especially in the categories of leadership, sometimes creativity, but especially leadership, to give opportunities in this virtual world, and then to report on student progress. Is anybody else seeing similar things with the kids just aren't, you know, I think a lot of us are exhausted by being on all these virtual meetings, and you sit, the kids are sitting in class all day, and I think they're just exhausted, especially when a lot of the classes are sit and get, and then they feel like there's busy work. And so I don't know, what are your teachers reporting on student progress? What are you all hearing from your people? Does anybody want to speak to that?
We're in a similar situation that you are. I think I work at a middle school in Paducah. And we have some of our GT kids who are literally failing. Not tremendous amount, but they are failing some of their content classes. I am having to but we're reaching out and talking to them, and they know they can do better. I think they're just overwhelmed with the organization sometimes, or the extended period of time in front of a computer. And I'm altering my GT lessons quite a bit based on their lack of participation and their apathy, making things somewhat social and interactive, and giving them an opportunity to kind of visit with each other as part of our lesson, and then talking about something that I'm being very student driven right now, trying to find what they're interested in, because some of the stuff that I want to talk about, they don't care at all. And now they can just click a little button and they're gone. And I hate to lose them. So I'm not saying I'm dumbing it down. I'm just trying to adjust and have more conversations, like would you rathers, and then turn them into higher level thinking discussions as I kind of pull them into the class. And plus, we can't do hands-on activities right now, or very limited, because some kids don't have what they need at home to even make the little, glider that we're trying to make out of plastic and straws. And that part of it's frustrating. But, most of them are still coming. My 8th graders I'm struggling with the most. And I haven't even started the conversations with teachers about, well, I've started them. We haven't had a formal discussion about what we're going to do with report cards. So I'm all ears.
Anybody else, as far as reporting student progress, seeing the underachievement? How are we reporting that to parents? I know I feel like we set ourselves up for scrutiny from parents if we say that their students not meeting, and we haven't been communicating with parents regularly throughout the semester. I know, some of our schools are doing a great job. I know one of our assistant principals has been on home visits for the kids who are ghosting and, who aren't participating. And so to document all of that with not meeting, the progress for gifted is one thing, but then, I don't know. Maybe it's just, a limited problem, or maybe most people aren't progress reporting yet. I don't know. I just know that that's a topic here in our district right now, is the kids who are doing poorly, and how to report that, because we want to have honest reporting, but we also need to take into consideration the social emotional needs of our kids. So
same thing here, Heather. We just actually had a teacher meeting. It was last week, and that was exactly what we're talking about, because our teachers, when they go to report this information, and these kids have not been, they're trying to be cognizant of the barriers that these kids are facing, and they may not be meeting because of the barriers that are out of their control. And so we had a lot of conversation about how to write that down, how to communicate that. And honestly, with many of these students, it was going to be having to actually add comments to that progress report of, hope, first semester, didn't see your child, didn't see your student, this, when opportunities were available, child didn't participate, hoping that next semester, when these opportunities again were there, that they will come. These are the times and dates and things. So it's there's so many different things. It just complicates it.
All right. This is good conversation.
I can just second what Julie said. So all I've asked teachers to do is just to document the attempt to service, because ultimately it's just a change in thinking. You can't really accurately report on their gifted growth because you're not having the interactions that you would have in a normal teaching setting. So to say that someone is not progressing it's just as not fair as saying that they're exceeding expectations. Like, there's just, we just put a disclaimer on there, during COVID-19, we're offering as many different opportunities as we can, and the choice whether or not to participate is still the student and parent choice. The teachers are just putting a statement on there, something like that, and that it will continue to be offered, and whenever they're ready to re-engage or whatever, that it's there for them. But right now, everyone is just doing the best that they can, and the best that they can is good enough. The best that you can right now is good enough. I read a great article yesterday about the kids are not behind. They're not lagging. They're not meeting standards. They are surviving a pandemic. It's just a change in thinking. It's a pedagogical problem is really what it is. But I understand the need to want to have accurate reporting. And so really the only thing you can say is this is what we've offered, and engagement during COVID-19 is really just a personal choice. And when you're ready to re-engage, we're going to be here, for you to re-engage. But right now, we love you and we notice that you're doing the best you can. I just think that's honest reporting.
Those are good comments. So I've tried to put people into groups. There are some people that I can't assign a group to because of it says the type of device doesn't support a breakout room. So I'm going to read off the names of these people, and if you'll just stay in this room, then Toddy, if you could try to lead this group in a discussion of the topics that people want to discuss, that would be awesome. So Toddy, your device for some reason doesn't support breakout rooms, and like I said, breakout rooms is new for Microsoft Teams. So if you'll just stay in this room along with these other people I'm going to list off. So Melissa Grubb, Hannah England, Amy Goins, Angela Hunter, Melissa Biggerstaff, Sarah McClanahan, Kim says guest, and G Barnes says guest. You'll need to stay in this room and not move to another one of these other rooms. And we'll see if that works. I hope it does. Like I said, I haven't used this before, so please give me some grace today. That would be great. You should be able to record what goes on in your room. There's like a little ellipses at the top of the screen. If you want to click record, if you figure out how to do that and record what goes on in your room, that would be good to give that a try to record those breakout sessions. I also have 9 people in the GT coordinator group, about 13 people in the GT teacher group, and then there's just a couple of us in the GT and GT teacher group, and I'll try to go in that group and facilitate that group if you'll stay out here, Toddy, and do the other group of people.
Sure.
So I'm going to click start rooms here in just a second. It allows you to have an announcement, of when you'll be coming back. And I'd like for somebody in the group to kind of record those big rocks of things that you talk about, so that when we come back in about, I've got 11:24, let's say we come back at a quarter till, like 11:45, and then we'll come back and we'll share out some of some of the big rock things that we talked about. Hope that gives us enough time. And then also possibly set a date for our next meeting. Is that okay with everybody? All right, so the GT coordinators, that's going to be you, Heather. You should be in that room, I hope. Kathy Carver, you should be in the GT teachers room, and I'll try to be in the GTC and GT teacher, the both room there. All right, so I'm going to see if I can get this to work. And then it should bring you back to the room. Hopefully, I'll try to give you an announcement, like I said, about 5 minutes before 11:45. Okay? All right. It's spinning. Right. And I'm going to join this GT teacher and GT coordinator room. I don't know how I join it though. But Toddy, you go ahead and be talking.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt you if you were going to say anything else. Well,
Right.
Hello everybody. I'm glad to be part of your breakout session today. And I think you can still see Kathy's screen that is up here, possible topics to discuss. And anything that is a concern to you, good things or need help with something, I would just love to have us all discuss it. So what is it that you all would like to focus on?
I'm still struggling with the testing. We still have not, I've still not been able to test my fourth graders. And I had planned it, and then we were in class for about 2 weeks. Then we've been out since. And I just feel so behind. And I know I'm not the only one, but just trying to even get teachers to nominate for primary talent pool. I mean, there's just so many things that I'm just not able to feel successful at.
And who is it that's speaking right now?
Sarah McClanahan from Lawrence County.
Sarah, for some reason, I don't see you on the screen.
Sorry, I had my camera turned
It's
off.
okay.
I'm here now.
Sarah, I'm going to tell you something. Being in the middle of a pandemic, we are under the most unusual, strangest circumstances. So you don't test and your identification goes down a little bit, then we're going to pick it up next year. And I don't think that we can stress over things that are out of our control. So for example, in Marshall County, we administer the COGAT every spring to all of our third graders and all of our sixth graders. Well, we're not doing that this year. There's no COGAT testing. I have no scores for general intellect, and that's okay. We're going to figure out our plan when everybody's back in school, whether we test instead of third graders and sixth graders, maybe test third and fourth graders and, sixth and seventh graders so that we catch up on those kids we missed. We're just going to have to work accordingly. All I can say is don't stress. This is the way it is during a pandemic. So you're behind. We're all behind.
What about and I'm new to this position too. I mean, this is my third year, but of course new, trying to figure out all of this along with it. I do have fourth graders who have scores based on STAR assessments that have met the criteria. So I can go ahead and those teachers can make those referrals, correct? Even though I've not, they've not been given the COGAT test.
Okay. You just asked a question that sounds like it's going to have a really easy answer. I'm going to throw a wrench in this. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you all take this however you want, because different districts do things in different ways. Mm-hmm. The first thing is that if you have STAR scores, that's going to be for math and reading. So COGAT has nothing to do with that. COGAT's general intellect.
Right.
Okay, so if you have scores that for primary talent pool are at the 90th percentile and above, and then for gifted, it's at the 96th percentile and above, that's great that you have your scores. So think about best practices. You don't want to give out teacher recommendations for kids who scored well. That's a little bit backwards. You want teachers to recommend any students who have those gifted characteristics, and your test scores are just a backup to that.
Okay.
So I'm going to explain why, the rationale behind that. If you were to hand out teacher recommendations or ask teachers to recommend these kids who have these test scores, you're going to miss the special considerations children.
Mm-hmm.
So what you want is your teacher recommendation with that checklist of gifted characteristics. You want to be your jumping off point. You collect that evidence, and I don't know how you all do that, but usually we say if they have over 50% of those characteristics, it makes it a valid recommendation.
Okay.
Because most students, any student in your school is going to have 2 or 3 or 4 of those characteristics. We're looking for a majority. So once you have teacher recommendations that have a majority of gifted characteristics, now you start seeing if you have test scores to back that up.
Right.
And if you don't, then you see if you have kids who have special considerations. The key thing for this to work is that your teachers are educated on what giftedness looks like. Because the teacher recommendation is going to be very subjective if you haven't, I'm going to say trained your teachers on what the characteristics of giftedness, what they look like in different children.
Right.
So you've got to educate your teachers first before you start flipping things around.
Right.
And doing
And I try to do that. I meet with them at the beginning of the school year and go over what those characteristics are. You know, this year we did it virtually, so I didn't get to meet with them during their PLCs. But looking for those characteristics they see in the classroom first, and then, like you said, back it up with those test scores. So I do have students who have both. And then just keeping. And I think right now too, even though we've been remotely 95% of the time, it's harder for the teachers to really get to know those kids like we would in the classroom. And I think they're struggling with that too.
Absolutely. So the way we're looking at this, especially here in Region 1, I'm not just speaking for Marshall County, we are under these circumstances. We have some kids who have never met their teacher in person.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some kids who've been in the classroom, now we have no kids in the classroom. Again, if that means our identification numbers drop, then so be it. Our numbers drop.
Right.
We're not doing this to meet a quota. We're not doing this because we want to have certain percentages for KDE. We're doing this because we want to effectively identify and serve gifted kids. And if we can't do that effectively, we need to put it on hold.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else? Is there any concerns or good things going on you want to share?
I would. Can you understand me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. For some reason on Teams, this headset seems to be.
You are freezing up and cutting out a little bit. Can you hear us?
Stumbling sometimes, so I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Where? Yeah. Okay. I might wait till he gets off of the meeting. I don't want to keep freezing.
Okay. Okay. Is there any other questions about best practices with identification? Do you all have, besides it being put on hold during this time of COVID? Okay. What about services for students? Again, that's completely affected by COVID and NTI, but do you all have questions about servicing gifted learners?
I would love to hear
what people do with their high school students, if anybody wants to share with that.
Does anybody want to share?
I know, of course, Amy, right now that we have, like most of you, probably created a Google Classroom for each grade. And so we've been putting posts out there. Maybe like the GSE application is coming up due, GSA application is coming up in January. Of course, GSP will be coming up soon. So we're just communicating with our high school students that way, just to make sure that they know. And then if they were to need help, like I was able to have a Google Meet with a student this week to talk about his GSA application. So we've been able to offer that service. And then my coworker, she's been doing we've been doing these winter challenges to put out there for students. And like whether it's the daily set game or a logic game, and then we'll do a drawing and we'll mail them like a gift card or something. And so right now, because high school, we've always struggled with servicing just because their classes, but we've enjoyed the Google Classroom and having that opportunity to communicate. And like the lady said, just offering opportunities, whether they take it or not.
That's pretty much what the exact same thing I've been doing too. So I just didn't know if anybody else had any other ideas. I've been doing Google form check-ins like, hey, do you need help with your applications? Let me know what I can do to help you with your regular classes and things like that, just so I'm staying in communication with them and that I know that they're getting this information I'm pushing out, at least seeing it.
Right.
Now, keep in mind that I'm not in the classroom, that I'm actually at a cooperative. And so we're trying to think out of the box here. And we have a regional GT group because it's Eastern Kentucky. But one thing that we're working on is a calendar that we share amongst all the GT folk. And we are putting performance events and things like that on there. And we've encouraged them to have like watch parties. For instance, we've put the Nutcracker on there. You know, I think we put the Messiah last week, but I got to check on that for those kids that are in the performing arts. So they can get in there and they can have like a watch party and watch it together and talk about the elements of performance and, you know, stage design and things like that, because they're going to pick up on those things and like that. For a second semester, we're actually working on for our leadership and our social studies kids. Sorry about that. Just got a text. We're working on doing a version of KUNA or KYA. I think we're going to go with a KYA model for those kids in leadership and that have also social studies and that kind of thing. And we're going to do that, of course, regionally and virtually. And the whole idea there is that we're hoping that for some of those kids that really develop an interest in that extends next semester when they might be, you know, but the big thing we've run into in Eastern Kentucky is funding. So one thing, Toddy, that I would love for you to kind of ponder is, and I want to ask that question, if students in the individual schools, I mean, I know funding is so fluid and the whole process is pretty strange, but if you could kind of tell me, like, for instance, if you have 2 or 3 kids in a district that really want to compete KYA or KUNA, can that GT funding be used to support? Okay, that's what I thought. So just checking. So the other side of that, that we're trying to,
do the students do fundraising? Because I'm going to tell you, our leadership kids who wanted to go to KYA like the past couple of years, they sold sweet tea during lunch. They went to Walmart, bought jugs and jugs of sweet tea, and then sold it, I don't know, for 50 cents or $1 a cup. And we had money left over to pay for the bus driver and everything. So yeah. Get creative when it comes to maybe fundraising ideas.
Well, you're also talking about an incredibly lower socioeconomic area that's been significantly impacted by the loss of jobs and things. And so some fundraising for us is incredibly difficult. It can be done. I mean, like sometimes we can find and the funny thing about that, especially in Eastern Kentucky, is that you have some counties that have pockets of prosperity, if you want to call it that or whatever. And then you have other schools that it's going to be very difficult because the school itself is isolated, the community is extremely small, and funding within that area is going to be incredibly limited. So we'll try to get creative with that. We'll think about it. The other thing that we're also doing for some of those students, again, because, you know, I have a social studies focus, is that one thing we're working on is with the National Constitution Center. We're planning this for next semester because you can contact them and they'll actually have a constitutional scholar and attorney who will Zoom in. And so you can find some, and especially with it being post-election, that would be a real good discussion. And Sarah, Lawrence County works with us a lot at KVEC. So you can, kind of, yell at me, talk to me. But anyway, we're hoping to do that. One goal that I have also within this, especially because I'm trying to be really creative since we're virtual. Now, this one has not even been touched yet, but there is a great book. And so help me, Hannah. It's written by Kenneth C. White, and he's a phenomenal historian, but he wrote a book about the Spanish flu about 3 years ago, way before any pandemic had hit, and he loves to Zoom in to classrooms and discuss his book. And I think it would be great, especially for our science kids, some of those that would really like to maybe possibly read that book and to have that discussion with him. He loves to come in to talk about the numbers. And then he'll even do, he'll kind of, I guess now is going to bring it forward, because if you follow him on Twitter, he's doing a lot of research too, about the coronavirus. So I mean, there's just a couple of things that they were trying to get for second semester for those kids, because we're trying to service them regionally and be kind of.
Can you repeat his name? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me double check, but it's actually I've got one of his books up here on the thing.
Will he do that for free?
Kenneth C. Davis is his last name. I always call him the last name. I'm pretty sure that he does. Like, if you contact him, if you find him on Twitter or whatever, and just say, and one book he has too is called In the Shadow of Liberty. That's another book he probably would talk about. And that book, again, now that would be social studies driven, but he talks about, the subtitle of the book, I think, is 5 Presidents, 3 Slaves, and the Legacy of something. I can't remember the whole subtitle to that one, but and I read that book. And by the way, both of those books, he tends to write for toward a middle school audience, but it's an elevated middle school audience. And of course, high school kids read it. He's great. Yeah, not a problem. But I mean, he's one of those that will do that. Some National Geographic events where explorers and stuff, come into us, and we can tell the teachers and say, okay, this is happening on this day. But the big thing for us is that Google Calendar that we've created regionally. We're just getting started, so it still has, some glitches, and we're still trying to put some stuff in there. But that is our big motivator. That's what Jennifer, Carol, and I are working on, is creating that calendar and just really putting things out there to where we can service the kids regionally. But now all of those were goals. The only thing we've put on there is like the Christmas stuff right now, so the kids can get on there and see that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, just to let you know, GT funds that districts receive usually don't even pay the salary of the GT teacher, because our funding from the state is so low. But, board offices and principals sometimes have money in general funds that they can pull something out if you have just 2 or 3 students needing something. So I would just exhaust all resources, even if it doesn't come from GT. I have to throw that in there before we go back to the main group. Is there anything else anybody wants to share? We've got less than a minute. Are you all good?
Kim, what is your last name, if you don't mind?
Yeah, don't mind at all. Don't know why I went in as Sergeant, because I've been coming to these meetings all semester. Sergeant my last name is Sergent, but if you email me, it is Kimberly. They used my whole first name. Sergeant, and we say Sergeant, not Sergeant, at Letcher, and because I still have my county email, letcher.kyschools.us. Of course, you know the rest.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. It just says guest on there, and I just, it's always nice to have another resource in your pocket.
Oh, God. So, and that's going to take but yes, but now you high school folks, there are some other things. So Hannah, you and Amy are the high school people.
I'm all grade levels.
I am as well.
Okay. Well, but if I see stuff about high school stuff, I'll get your all's emails from Kathy. And perfect. I'll send you stuff as I become aware of things, but especially with Martin Luther King Day, coming up, and Black History Month, there's going to be some big stuff. I think that Ford's Theater Oh my God, write that down. Ford's Theater. They do free online performances all the time, and they've got some big stuff. Oh, just go look them up and sign up for their emails. They do stuff oh my God, I can't believe I forgot those. Okay, yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you for the watch parties. Were those performances free that
Yeah.
you
Yeah, they
made
were free.
available?
A lot of places are doing that because I guess, especially like in New York, I mean, I think we all know what's going on. These places like the Met and things like that are doing free performances to keep their performance numbers up, so that if they go for funding and that kind of thing, that they're kind of like, see, we're still meeting a need and that kind of thing. That's my guess. That's my submission, which is probably, so they're really willing to, and plus to keep their names out there, and to keep, and the other thing, I saw a really good article the other day, to keep their performers fresh. Like we have a local, we have Barter Theater that's even though it's in Virginia, it's just across, because I live 8 miles from the Virginia border. So I live closer to Virginia than I do Kentucky. So anyway, and my joke. But anyway, so I could be there in an hour and 20 minutes from my house. They are the State Theater of Virginia, and they are doing some awesome online stuff. But there's a payment for it. But so I go check them out all the time.
Do you know if
hey everybody, I think we're back
virtually right now?
Say that again, Sarah.
Did you say that the Barter had free like shows that they're
I don't think they
right
have
now?
free. Yeah, they're not doing free, I don't think.
Okay. I love the Barter.
It's out.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
I know, I do too.
Well, I hope that worked. Did y'all have some good discussion? I guess we'll find out, right? We'll find out. Okay. Well, that was the first time, like I said, I've ever used that tool. It's a new tool in Microsoft Teams. It seemed to work okay. We'll have to figure out what kind of device you have to be on in order to participate in a room, I guess. So that was new. So I hope that staying in that room worked for you guys. Did that work okay, Toddy? Y'all staying in that room? Love the head nod. Okay, so let's do some sharing out, and then we'll talk about maybe meeting in January or February. Okay, so I guess the GT coordinator group, who was going to took notes for that and is going to share out for us.
Oh, I took notes.
Okay.
We talked about testing and identification for students, and we talked about how the test scores are good for a couple of years. So right now, a lot of us have testing kind of on hold because of COVID. And so, just being patient with that and watching the process, but we might be able to use, some older test data if we need to. If we've got kids on virtual who we want to get into a program, something from last year maybe might help with some of that. We talked about PLCs and just about how we need to train our teachers what to look for in the characteristics, and also considering adult sponsors and coaches who might not work for the school system as that may be a group of kids who we haven't identified simply because those people are not familiar with the process and don't know. And so we need to look out for those groups to make sure we're including, Kathy talked about the dance team at her school district and how there was nobody in for performing arts, but the dance team members were amazing. And so, looking to see who's not being included in our programming that could be. And then we also talked about providing services for students in different ways. So if there's not a class that meets that child's needs, that we could provide some independent study instead of having if the kid is good at singing or good at drumming, then they don't have to have necessarily a coach for that. They could have an independent study through the primary talent pool as well, or they could be enlisted in a class at the high, if it's secondary, they could just go to a class like chorus or show choir or something like that. And then also testing, along with the testing, we went back to it later, and we talked about how we could put some of the tests, sociograms and things like that, on a Google form if we wanted to do some at-home testing, and we would still be able to cover that.
Thank you, Sarah. And so that was
anything out. Okay.
That was good. So that was the GT teacher group?
It was coordinator
group. Gotcha. And I have started a spread. What?
Was I in the wrong group?
Teachers?
It doesn't matter. I'm sorry if I put you in the wrong group. Sorry about that.
So well taking notes.
That's all right.
Oh, was it a teacher group?
It's okay. And by the way, I started a see if I can share this with you guys, a spreadsheet that has a lot of different see if I can share this really quick. Oh, wait a minute. Breakout room is closed. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, let me just bring this back up before I lose y'all. I don't want to lose you. Just want you to know that Kathy Carver shared with me an independent study form. It's a Google form that she kind of adapted from Lisa Gimmert. And I have put a bunch of resources onto this spreadsheet with hyperlinks to it. And that's one of the hyperlinks that goes to this study, this independent study form, and how to go about doing an independent study. It's a really good resource. I was going to try to share that with you, but I'm kind of afraid I'll lose y'all here at the end. So maybe I better not do that. But I will put that spreadsheet with all these different resources and links. And if y'all have got any links here that you want to share to different things, please go ahead and put those in the chat while we're talking. And then I can also add that to the spreadsheet that I've started. So thanks for sharing all those different things. All right, let's do the GT teacher group. Who's going to share out for that?
That was my group. She was in the
Okay.
wrong group and she just shared it. So,
Oh,
correct?
I messed it up. I'm sorry. I said it was a coordinator, but it was a teacher.
Yeah, just
okay.
say the other.
Okay. So what about the GT coordinator group? That would have been Heather's group.
I can share.
Okay, thanks.
Our big rocks were students who are failing or underachieving. We talked a lot about engagement and how, you know, kids have Zoom fatigue the same as adults do. And a lot of times they're ritualistically compliant, just there, but not really engaged. And, you know, and then if they're not engaged, sometimes they're just hitting that little button and checking out if they're there to begin with. Some things that are working really well to service kids. Michelle was talking about Renzulli being a good way to get kids engaged. It may not necessarily be the content, but it certainly is more engaging for some of her students. And then Julie shared some of the consortium that's going on in Fayette County with their elementary schools, and then also for visual and performing arts, their Picnic in the Park program that's working really well. So it's always good to hear the things that are going well as well. And we talked a little bit about testing, the concern about students. I know Michelle has done some of her evaluation in her district, and she said that there just aren't kids scoring at that 9th stay 9. And that's a concern that we feel here in our district too. When we gave the Neglieri, we had some 9th stay 9 on that screener. Since then, we've administered InView with our kids who met the screening data either from Neglieri or from their STAR scores. At any rate, we don't have our InView scores back, but that is certainly a concern that we're all feeling too, that with so many months of learning remotely. We did have our kids back for a short stint, but we're just worried the same way. Are we going to have those 9th stay 9 scores? So one way that we're looking at that in our district is, even if they don't qualify, if they don't have qualifying scores, that doesn't mean that we can't personalize learning for them and still meet their needs, with or without a GSSP. So I'm sure we're going to have a much bigger watch list than we would typically have this year. And that's just, that's something we're going to have to address here. Sorry to be so long.
No, I didn't think that was long at all. Thank you for sharing that out. And thank you for facilitating those groups too, to the 3 of you who joined us today. Really appreciate that. Okay, and then my group, I think Kathy House is going to share out for my group. So we were supposed to be the both group.
I took the notes.
Yes.
Okay,
sorry, Amanda.
It's okay. First, we talked about testing. We talked about how we were bringing in small groups to do the testing, and also that we were bringing in some 4th graders that were missed last year to complete some testing. We talked about providing services. Most everybody, it seems like, has Google Classroom set up, and they're scheduling Google Meets with activities. Participation is sometimes still an issue, but the service is being offered. In my district, our teacher is actually bringing in small groups. I shared that she brought in our leadership group, and they led a toy drive campaign. And then also someone in our group shared about virtual field trips, which Kathy has a link to that on the spreadsheet that she's going to share. And then we also just talked about different ways to get in contact with parents, because we're struggling with that some. We talked about the Infinite Campus messaging, blocking the number because they won't always answer if it's the school number, and then using programs like Class Tag, Remind, and Class Dojo.
Good, good. Kathy, I saw you laughing at that. Kathy Carver. Oh, we have to do what we got to do, right? Good sharing out. Let me see if I can share with you this spreadsheet I tried to share earlier. Let me know when you can see the spreadsheet. Can you see it? Okay. So from all the different cadres I've been going to, I've been trying to start a sheet that has all these different links to it. Like, for example, there's going to be a virtual Christmas concert, the Bach Singers. I've got that here on the enrichment line. Can y'all see that right here? And that was something that Kim Surgeon's group got from the KVEC thing. There's a link to that. They're thinking about doing a Google Meets and doing maybe doing a watching it together or watching it separately. I wasn't sure how that was going to work. Kim, if you want to, you can speak up to that. And then they're going to do like a critique afterwards. That'll be her visual and performing arts students, some of them. There's Nova videos that got shared at the WKY meeting on Friday that I went to. I got a lot of things from WKY on Friday that I've tried to list here. Minecraft, Leader in Me, if you're a part of that, they're having a speech contest coming up. Lisa Trimble from Caldwell County, she shared virtual field trips, all these different virtual field trips that she's got going in a Google thing. I've shared that with you. I went to the Louvre myself yesterday. Just thought I'd let y'all know I went to Paris yesterday. And of course, we got Versailles and Paris here in Kentucky, so I guess I could go to either one of those, right, if I really wanted to. Also, I've tried to put something in most every category here. Shoot, where is this? I'm sorry. But I did share, Kathy's got something that she has, what is it called? That she tweaked from Lisa Van Gimmert. There's the student independent study. Some people really like to use those. And so I've got that agreement, and then also the form, her Google form that I've got a link to there. So I tried to put some different things up here for you guys as we're thinking about services for kids and what it looks like in COVID style. I know we've got like one more minute here, but I have tried to kind of make that seems to be a big need is, well, there's the service option in the regulation. What does that look like in NTI? So I've tried to give you some thoughts about that in this spreadsheet, and I'm going to put that into our Google folder to share with you guys as well. And then as I find more things, I'll try to add that to it and re-upload that so that I keep it current and fresh. So I hope that that's going to be helpful. I have really been cheered up by meeting with you guys today and seeing you today. Like someone said before, a lot of us are getting into the whole just Zoom fatigue. So, and digital watching on the monitor fatigue, going from one meeting to another. I'm sure that's very, very, very hard. I'm not sure what will be a good time for us to meet for next month. So what I'll probably do is just send out a doodle poll to you guys, if that's all right. Or if you want to go ahead and put it on your calendar, we can. Which would you rather do? Just put something in the chat or raise your hand. I don't care, whichever.
I like the Google poll.
Okay, we'll just do a doodle poll then, and I'll send that out then. So thank you so much for your time today. I hope that y'all have a very lovely holiday. get some rest, take care of yourself, because you're the only one that can do that. And when we take care of ourselves, then we can take care of others. If your cup is empty, there's no way that you can fill the cup of other people, right? So just know that I appreciate you. Hope you have a great holiday, and I look forward to talking to you either in January or February. Take care, friends. Bye.